6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country and around the world. We have plenty coming up. Are you sweating on clearing, or are you raising a glass to your little darlings getting into university? Is it still the best option? Is it fit for purpose? Plus, the Ukraine war 6 months on. And the best way to save money on your next car. What a mosaic of wonders. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the very latest news. Here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Alistair. Good afternoon. It is 2 minutes past 12. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. While the travel disruption continues on mainline trains today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of the UK rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Some train services will also be affected on Sunday by the aftermath of today's strike action. Well, yesterday saw little to no services running on the London Tube, while most buses across west and southwest of the capital were also cancelled. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its handling in firing almost 800 workers earlier this year. That's according to the Insolvency Service. The firm sparked backlash after it sacked staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng asked the Insolvency Service to carry out an urgent inquiry into whether the law had been broken. There are no outstanding criminal proceedings, but a civil investigation is ongoing. Dockers are due to strike at the port of Felixstowe, the UK's largest container shipping port, tomorrow. The strike, which is over workers' pay, is due to last 8 days. The Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company had offered workers a £500 lump sum, I should say, on top of a 7% pay rise, but around 1,900 members of the Unite Union have rejected this offer.
The RPI is running now at 12.3%. If you accept 7%, then your standard of living goes down by 5.3%. And as for the £500, it's an insult because if you do your maths and you take away the national insurance increase that the government have foisted upon us and also the income tax, you end up roughly with just over £300.
Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader. Writing in The Times, he accused Foreign Secretary Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut tax to ease the rising cost of living. The former Cabinet Minister also said he won't be returning to frontline politics. Meanwhile, the two candidates vying to be the Conservative leader have outlined their plans for policing if they were to become the next Prime Minister. Well, speaking at the GB News hustings in Manchester last night, Rishi Sunak called for the Justice Secretary to be put in charge of parole boards to prevent political correctness from affecting sentencing decisions. He also gave his support for stop-and-search powers to tackle knife crime. Meanwhile, Liz Truss said officers should be more focused on tackling crime on the streets rather than on social media.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
Stop and search is the thing that we know makes an enormous difference. It's actually the powers that we are trialling in other areas in the country that allow the police to stop and search previously convicted knife criminals.
A 23-year-old man has been charged with the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester. Lewis Jones has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of abduction. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later today. The victim has since been safely reunited with her family. Weeks of drought in Europe have led to lower than normal water levels in rivers and lakes. But it's also unveiled treasures that have remained hidden for years. Well, in Spain, water levels have reached so low that it's revealed a prehistoric stone circle dubbed the Spanish Stonehenge. It's been hidden since the 1960s as the area was turned into a reservoir. Meanwhile, in Serbia, the river Danube has fallen to one of its lowest levels in almost a century and exposes the hulks of more than 20 German warships that were sunk during the Second World War. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. In homes across the country, I dare say, celebrations continue as families reflect upon the triumphs of their offspring in this week's A-level results. It was a tough year, no doubt, but nearly 500,000 got the grades that they needed to go to university. But, and it is a big but, 53,000 are still waiting in clearing. That's the University Colleges Admissions System market. It's a place that tries to match demand with supply. Kids who didn't get to where they wanted to, and universities that actually have spare capacity. So demand is still very high and efforts are being made to restore the rigour of the A-level, damaged, of course, by teacher-assessed grades, grade inflation and all the rest of it. But in this era of fees, it's a costly investment for young folk and often their families who help out. It's also costly for the rest of us, the taxpayer, with billions of debt in the public accounts, much of which will never be paid back. So, today we are asking if universities are fit for purpose, are they worth what they cost us all? And, really importantly, are they doing what the country needs them to be doing? I raise that last point because there are alternatives, and alternatives that might just be better at giving the nation what it needs and getting young people into gainful employment just a bit sooner. Now, in the Conservative leadership hustings, a bit of which you saw in Tatiana's news bulletin, which I hosted in Manchester, the current favourite, Liz Truss, said that she wanted more emphasis on maths in schools and for eyes to be wide open to the many other opportunities, including apprenticeships, technical qualifications and the rest of it that exist for our young people. And that included her own 2 daughters.
I think what's most important is what you do, not where you do it. So there are fantastic apprenticeships in areas like engineering and technology that I would be delighted for them to go for. Likewise, if they go to university, I am a unashamed proponent of studying things like maths and physics. So it depends on what course it is, it depends on what apprenticeship it is.
Now, this, of course, is the first year for T-levels. It's a technically focused qualification, and they say it's worth about 3 A-levels, the kind of average entry point to get to further or higher education and many universities. Just over 1,000 people gave them a go, and a government spokesman said overnight many had already secured their first job or an apprenticeship, and that 370 of them won places on university courses. So it is a stepping stone as well. The key point is that they focus on stuff like design, surveying, planning for construction, digital production, teaching and childcare. Other subjects, including engineering and manufacturing, finance, design and the law, will be introduced between next month and September 2023. So my point is that the options are growing and the focus is sharpening. And be in no doubt at all that post-Brexit, post-COVID, and under the real threat of recession, we need the best and the brightest, more than ever, to be well qualified and in work. How wide dare we open our eyes? I have a great lineup of guests to discuss it, but we also want to hear your experiences. Be you young or be you old, be it university or be it polytechnic, tech or FE. Did you get what you wanted? Did you get what you needed, as the Rolling Stones famously sang? And was it all worth it? So we really do want to hear your views. You can email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk with any comments that you have on the subjects that we're covering today. We're also on Twitter and we're on Facebook. So, two great guests to get us started. I'm delighted to be joined live here in the studio by an old friend of mine, Bobby Seagull, well known to all of you on our television screens, but also a mathematics teacher, a mathematics graduate and a mathematics postgraduate man. Before moving into education, he was also an investment banker, trading at Lehman Brothers and Nomura, and he's a qualified chartered accountant from Price Waterhouse. So, does the sums, also gets the job, and earns a good living. Also joining us down the line is Tom Richmond. Tom began his career as a teacher before then becoming a government advisor for the Department of Education to both Michael Gove and to Nicky Morgan. And he is now the director of EDSK, which stands for the Education and Skills think tank. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us. Going to flip-flop, want you to talk between yourselves as much as possible as well. I'm just going to get the ball rolling, and I'm going to start, if I may, with you, Bobby. Are universities fit for purpose?
So a lot depends, Alistair, on what you define an education and university for. Is an education purely just to get a set of qualifications so you can move up the ladder, get onto A-levels, get onto university, get a job? Or is education wider than that? Is that to create responsible, educated citizens that understand their place in Britain and their place within society? So it's a balancing act between the two.
And do you think the current structure of universities does that job?
Well, I would say it's a case of, if you look at our employment market, do we have enough doctors? Do we have enough teachers? Do we have engineers? I would say no. And who bears that responsibility? It has to be our education and university system. So perhaps...
Which is a perfect way then of bringing Tom into the conversation, because you sat cheek by jowl with people like Nicky Morgan, who's an old friend of mine, Michael Gove. I also know him very, very well. And my daughter's a teacher, worked with Michael Gove as well. And Gove revolutionised secondary education, caused real punch-ups in schools across the land, but he did it, stuck by it, and was widely applauded for it in most sectors. It seems to me that since Blair, all those years ago, universities, techs and FEs have hardly been looked at, other than the numbers, in terms of what they're there to deliver. Is it time to have a profound rethink, starting with the question, are they fit for purpose?
Yes, I think it is. And if you look at what's happened to apprenticeships over the past 10 years, it tells a very sad story. Just 10 years ago, almost 300,000 young people were starting apprenticeships each year. Even before the pandemic, that had fallen to just over 200,000. And tragically, during the pandemic, that fell even further to around 160,000. So a university is a fantastic choice for some young people to study some courses. But if we don't give young people the option to looking elsewhere, then we're going to end up in a situation, I fear, that young people go to university because they think it's the only option for them. And they think that's sort of the default option for them. Whereas we know from the Office for National Statistics that 43% of recent graduates are now working in non-graduate jobs that don't need them to have a degree. 43%. And I'd say for those young people, a lot of them probably didn't make the best choice, but that might be because we just didn't give them the opportunity to study something else.
I'm going to stick with you, Tom, and then bring Bobby back in, because you raise a point I was going to talk about a little bit later on, but you're on it now, so let's go with it. I mean, it does strike me that it's not only policy think tank people like you and the ministers with whom you have worked in the past, and Bobby, who writes brilliantly about this stuff and goes on telly about it quite brilliantly. It's also careers officers in schools. It's people who sit there behind a desk looking at your profile, looking at your CV, looking at how well you've behaved and how badly you've behaved in recent years. You say, yep, you need to go and do accountancy at Portsmouth Polytechnic, or no, darling, you're a classics student at Oxford or Cambridge. They really need to get their act together as well, don't they?
Yeah, it's a really big challenge because as a former teacher myself, I know how hard it is to give good careers advice because teaching is a graduate profession, as Bobby was just saying. So we have gone through one particular route. So for us to then give really good quality advice around where are the best apprenticeships in my local area? What's a degree apprenticeship? The government's trying to give young people a chance to study degrees through an apprenticeship, which is quite a new idea, but they're very small. So where are they? How do I find them? Where are the best ones and where are the ones that maybe aren't right for me? That's a really big challenge to ask of teachers in schools and colleges. And if we don't have the support from, really high quality careers advisors, both in schools and working with employers, then again, I fear that young people are just going to be making choices that they look back on in a few years down the line and say, actually, you know what, that probably wasn't the right choice for me. And it's really heartening sometimes to read stories in the newspapers of young people who started university, but actually realised quite quickly it wasn't good for them and then switched to an apprenticeship. But again, that only works if we've got enough other options.
Yeah. Dead easy for a teacher at secondary level with you to have known from an early age you weren't only numerate, but you were brilliant at it. But did you ever come across a teacher or a careers advisor who said, and I'll tell you what, Bobby, do these sums qualifications, this mathematics stuff, and you might end up at Lehman Brothers, Nomura, Pricewaterhouse, chartered accountant, let alone become a telly star?
To be honest, I would say with my teachers at school, they generally said, your job now is to get the best set of qualifications you can. Make sure your GCSEs, your A-levels are top quality. And then from there, you give yourself options. But I would say sometimes with teachers...
But sorry to interrupt, that's like selling... I'm going to talk to Quentin... my brain's gone dead. We're going to be talking about motoring prices, but that example is like giving somebody a car, but without giving them the manual of how it works and what you can do with it.
Yeah, it's a challenge because as a teacher, even myself, I often get asked early on in the year. So in fact, one of my students asked this to me back in April, May, before GCSEs. He said to me, Mr. Seagull, and he's quite a bright chap, he said, should I go to university? It's too expensive. Should I just start a business? And what I always tell my young people is that you should never discount it. When you're 11, 12, I always like to keep the options open because everyone should have the aspiration. Yeah. Because if you say 11, 12, no, you should think about an apprenticeship, you're discounting a whole possible range of careers. Yeah. But as children get older, 13, 14, 15, then you should start having those open, honest conversations.
Eyes wide open, as I said earlier on. The other bit, Tom, if I can come back to you, which kind of flows from it, let's assume we've now gone through the careers advice and they've all listened to what you and Bobby have just said and they get their act together more effectively in the future. In my day, if you applied to university, you got an interview. I applied to Cambridge and was rejected after the interview, perfectly reasonably. I then got an interview at Bristol and got an offer that was a walk in the park. And my tutor for admissions back at my school said, they obviously want you, they like you, that's it. So off I went to Bristol and had a great time. But post-Blair, given the numbers, universities can't cope with an interview for everybody. So it is form filling, it is personal statement, it's predicted grade, and then it's fingers crossed for a walk in the park.
Yeah, and I think that's where we've had some concern from the government for quite a while about what they called low-value higher education. So what we've seen since tuition fees were raised to £9,000, we've seen a very large increase in courses like leisure studies, media studies, social studies, courses that we know don't lead to very high salaries and great job prospects at the end. Bobby talking about, the impact of things like maths, for example, has a huge impact if you can perform well in that sort of subject on your future earnings. But if young people go and study a degree course that doesn't really increase their earnings, it doesn't give them good job prospects, and then, of course, they won't pay back their student loan. And like you were saying, Alistair, at the start, if a young person doesn't pay back their student loan, the taxpayer has to pay back their student loan instead. And it creates this enormous pile of student debt, which has already reached almost £200 billion. And so for me, it really is a question of get that careers advice in early, like you say, and then give people some really good options to make sure that they don't find themselves in a situation which they might regret a few years down the line.
I so hope tutors for admission, vice-chancellors are listening to this conversation as well, and that we can print it up and send it to them as best we can. Because that was gold dust as well. I mean, the point at which you knew you wanted to do mathematics, that can be tested, that can be probed at a university level. And your lovely badge there, and I know anyway, Emmanuel College, Cambridge, they're very good at it, and most of the Oxbridge colleges still do it. But for the very people that we're talking about out there, who might be the next brilliant Dyson designers, they go to Dyson's own university now. They don't go to Imperial or wherever they used to go to. They're not going to get that chance to say, this is who I really am.
Yeah, so again, if you know what you want to do when you're 12, 13, 14, you've got that sort of bulletproof vision, then the teachers and schools can guide you. But if you're sort of not entirely sure, like you've got these skill sets, you're quite creative, maybe you're a dab hand in the design tech labs, I feel like sometimes education lets those people down. Because if you're getting straight A's, it's always an easy conversation at parents' evening. Yes, your son or daughter, A-levels, university, but the ones that maybe perhaps have skill sets that perhaps aren't, the exam system doesn't necessarily work for them, they're harder to work with, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Final point to both of you, and let's start with Tom again, if I may, because as I said at the very beginning, your think tank is not only about education, it's very much about education and skills. To what extent, and it doesn't matter about the colour of the government, whether it's Tory, Labour or a coalition come the next general election, whatever the state of government is, do you believe, as a former Department for Education advisor, that government needs to be smarter and sharper in assessing what the UK economy needs and tweaking further and higher education to those needs? Or, as many purists would say, no, universities are about education and the economy is for the Treasury and others to worry about. What's your take, Tom?
Well, again, as you were saying at the top of the show, Alistair, our economy is in pretty bad shape. And because our economy is in bad shape, our public finances, after COVID, now with the cost of living crisis, the government is not going to be able to spend money on activity that is just not adding any value. And that's why I think they do have some fair concerns around this issue of, are there university courses that are being put on in large numbers that aren't helping young people get good jobs at the end of it? And on the apprenticeships point, go back to what I was saying earlier, we know that a high quality apprenticeship it gives you work experience. It means you don't take on the student debt, and it means you get great wage and job prospects at the end of it. And so I would be looking as the government, both current and future governments, at what I can do in that apprenticeship space so that, yes, young people keep upskilling themselves so they don't get stuck at the end of school or college. They keep building up their experience and qualifications. But what we can't do is say the only way to achieve that is to spend 3 years at a university doing a single degree course, and then we just see what happens afterwards. That's never going to be the solution.
Yeah. Just before coming to Bobby for the final word, just to pull those 3 points together there, we're talking about careers advisors getting their act together, universities being, and further and higher education colleges as well, being much more proactive in making sure that they've got the right students. And yes, the entire tertiary education system should be attuned to what this economy needs, or we're all up the Swanee.
Yes, indeed. And I think that's where, when we talk about higher education, it's very important. That's not just about going to university. That's, of course, a great choice for some young people. But like you say, it can be a further education college. It can be an apprenticeship. We've got to get that system listening to what employers need. And of course, that can be different all over the country. It's not just going to be a single answer to that. But it's only when we get those different parts of the education system closer to what employers need, we'll get that productivity, that economic growth that, goodness me, we're going to need over the next few years for sure.
Tom Richmond, great to talk to you, and you're welcome anytime. Thank you very much indeed. That's Tom Richmond there, former government advisor, but also running the crucial EDSK, Education and Skills think tank. Look them up, read their stuff. It's quite brilliant. Final word goes to you, which I started, and that's where, as it were, that I want to finish. Because there is quite a profound debate here, and I know it from many people, that particularly university and higher education is something, and it goes right back to the Middle Ages, it not necessarily exclusively elite, but it's about the cherished value of learning for learning's sake and broadening this extraordinary organ sitting on top of our necks. But in the 21st century, we've got to eat, we've got to heat, we've got to light.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky balance, because as someone that's worked in the city in finance, I understand the economic value. We need to make sure that if there's a university system, it provides that financial benefit for the United Kingdom, the entire United Kingdom. But I do see some of my students, and I see them, and I think, of course, economic value is important, but the social capital that they gain from university, the maturity, the 3 years, 4 years to explore who they are as an individual, because once we start work, we're paying bills, etc. So
to be shouted at in my ear, I'm just stolen another 30 seconds, but he'll know exactly why. And yet, if you look, even at Oxbridge, you have Nuffield College because the motor industry did so well. You've got Robinson College because radio rentals did so well. And, as I said earlier, you've got Dyson. So enterprise that makes a lot of money can also do the right thing.
Yes, I think it's not mutually exclusive. You can have enterprise, financial value, and benefit for individuals too.
Brilliant. Bobby, I've asked you to come back at 1 o'clock. We have a brilliant guest who I've warned you about.
Yes.
She's an amazingly bright young woman who's gone down completely the non-academic road, but to huge, remarkable success. And I want you to join in conversation with her and give me my comments. But for now, to you, and again to Tom, who I'm sure has unplugged and gone off to make a cup of tea or something. Thank you both very much indeed for giving us such a terrific start. Bobby Seagull there, maths teacher and author, and Tom Richmond, the director of the EDSK think tank and a former government advisor. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've lots more coming up on today's programme, including we will be getting the very latest on the strikes across the transport network. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the weather.
For showers in the south, let's take a look. After a wet morning across Scotland, this afternoon should be brighter, but still with plenty of showers around. It'll also be blustery and cool in the west. Northern Ireland will have a much drier afternoon with some sunny spells developing. Mostly dry, but there's still a chance of a shower. The band of rain will still be across northern England this afternoon, accompanied by some strong winds. It will also be blustery across Wales, especially along the coast, with some showers in the south. Northern parts of the country will be drier though. The Midlands will see an afternoon of sunshine and showers. Some of the showers could be heavy, but it will still feel warm for this time of the year. Showers may also affect northern parts of East Anglia, but further south it will be mostly dry. There will be a cloud around, which is expected to disperse later on, and apart from a few showers, much of southern England should have a pleasant afternoon with a mix of cloud and sunshine and temperatures reaching between 22 and 25 degrees. We're heading into this evening and the band of rain continues to move south with further showers in the northwest, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. It is just seconds away from exactly 12:30, and we are here right through until 2 o'clock. Now, amidst the rising cost of living crisis and the looming threat of recession, the United Kingdom is also grappling with industrial action, led not least on Network Rail today by the RMT, ASLEF and others. Of course, that is directly related to the cost of living crisis because they don't want their terms and conditions changed, but they also want a chunky pay rise. Today, only 20%, 1 in 5, of train services will be running as 45,000 workers take to the picket line or stay at home, leaving many travellers stranded on one of the busiest summer weekends. Our Scotland reporter, David Donaldson, has the very latest.
Yeah, I'm outside Waverley Station on the picket line where all workers are understandably not happy with their pay and conditions. And it's not just that, it's about the safety they feel in the network as well. Delighted to see him joined by Mick Hogg, the RMT man in Scotland. Mick, what's it all about?
What the strike's all about is about fairness and equality, and what RMT are actually seeking is a fair pay increase and stability, job security for rail workers. Rail workers have actually been denied a pay increase for the last 3 years. So what we're actually seeking, what we're actually demanding is a pay increase for workers who have actually went above and beyond the call of duty during the height of the pandemic.
It's not just Network Rail we're talking about. Obviously, there's a massive strike, 45,000 workers across the UK. We're talking about here in Scotland. ScotRail, not a great situation there either.
Yes, the situation within the ScotRail is that we've actually, RMT's recently rejected the pay proposal that's on the table. So what we're now doing is we're going to ballot for strike action and action short. And what we're actually seeking is a fair pay increase, because the 5% that's on the table falls well short of where we actually need to be in terms of a pay increase that actually reflects the cost of living crisis.
It's going to be a long haul, isn't it, for commuters over we've seen trains 5:30, 6:30 the last train, and some trains obviously further north in Scotland not going at all.
Absolutely. We remain available for meaningful talks with Network Rail, the train operating companies, ScotRail, morning, noon and night. We don't want to actually go on strike, but our hands been forced. We've been forced to go on strike, and we're going to remain on strike until such time we actually get a fair crack off the whip, a fair pay increase for workers who have actually went above and beyond the call of duty during the height of the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Mick. There we go. Mick Hogg, RMT man here in Scotland, asking for a fair deal for workers. Let's see if that's going to happen, or do commuters face even more traffic chaos?
Davey, thank you very much indeed. The latest there from the front line at Edinburgh's rather beautiful Waverley Station, but be it architecturally beautiful or not great news for the travellers. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've plenty more still to come this afternoon. We'll be discussing the migrant channel crisis, as last night at the Conservative hustings in Manchester, I asked both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss what they would do about it, and they both told me that they would not push the boats back towards France. It was a very lively couple of moments in that discussion. We'll also be talking about Ukraine. Is Western fatigue over the conflict starting to set in, or is there an enduring determination to stand by those people cruelly invaded by Russia? But first, let's bring you right up to date at 27 minutes to 1 with the very latest headlines.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Well, as you've just been hearing, the travel disruption continues on mainline trains today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of the UK rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Some train services will also be affected on Sunday by the knock-on effect of today's strike action. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its handling in firing almost 800 workers earlier this year. That's according to the Insolvency Service. The firm sparked backlash after it sacked staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. There are no outstanding criminal proceedings, but a civil investigation is ongoing. Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader. Writing in The Times, he accused Foreign Secretary Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut tax to ease the rising cost of living. The former Cabinet Minister also said he won't be returning to frontline politics. A 23-year-old man has been charged with the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester. Lewis Jones has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of abduction. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later today. The victim has since been safely reunited with her family. TV online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 23 minutes to 1 and you're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. Almost 5,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel already this month. It brings the total number of people who've crossed the Channel this year to more than 21,000, double the number reached by the same time last year. So, inevitably, at the leadership hustings in Manchester last night, I asked both candidates whether they would consider something that David Davis proposed quite some time ago, and that is actually, physically, turning boats in the Channel back towards France. Liz Truss said that she didn't think that pushing boats back would work.
But that isn't going to fix the problem, because ultimately the people who are travelling to the UK, at the behest of these appalling people traffickers who are trading in human lives, are doing so because they want to live in the UK. And if they get sent back to France, the reality is what we know happens is they try and get into the UK again. So what we need to find is a permanent home for those people. And countries like Rwanda, they don't want a brain drain. They don't want large numbers of people leaving. They actually want people to contribute to the future of their economy. So the way to solve this issue, and I've talked to a number of my counterparts in Europe about this as well, is to find a way of making sure there is a long-term home for people who are involved in illegal immigration.
Rishi Sunak is also against sending the dinghies back, and he emphasised the need for the UK to move away from the European definition of what an asylum seeker is.
Here to implement that in the Channel, and given the boats that we're faced with, compared to how the Australians do it where they are. But look, no option should be off the table. But again, in the interest of being practical here and not just talking in abstract, let me give you two very specific things out of my 10-point plan, which is online for those of you who want to go and have a look at it, that I want to do. The first is very quickly move away from the European definition of what an asylum seeker is. Because it is too broad, it gets exploited by lefty lawyers and means that we can't send people back who shouldn't be here. We can move to a different convention, and we should do it as soon as possible.
Now, I say to you, purely as a reporter, if you weren't able to watch it, it is there on YouTube. But when I asked the question about pushing the boats back, I got a bigger round of applause simply for asking the question than either of the candidates did for giving those answers. But we're all for balance. That's why we wanted you to hear what Liz had to say and what Rishi had to say. Sitting next to me, I'm delighted to say, is our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Now, Mark, if you didn't catch it, did an absolutely brilliant, in-depth report earlier this week on the issue of migrant crossings. And I said to my team, I'm going to be talking to Liz and Rishi about it, and I really would love to have Mark with me live on the programme on Saturday to tell me what he made of what they had to say. I felt that it was denial.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be pretty brave as a politician to say that you will enact this pushback tactic.
Even if that's what most in your party deep down think.
There's absolutely no doubt that the audience out there would love to see these boats being pushed back to the shore. But those commanders who are in charge out there that would have to make that decision are fully cognizant of the fact that these are pretty flimsy vessels. They're absolutely full to the gunwales. When we were filming there during the week, there were 50 people on board one of these vessels, not an inch of space available.
And you're literally describing it. I mean, you saw it and filmed it, and I you know, as a viewer, not only someone who works with you at GB News, it was jaw-dropping. But even a touch from a border force light vessel could flip it over and people would die.
That's the potential and the fear, Alistair. They have tried this tactic. They even went to as far as to purchase jet skis for border force personnel, and they enacted it on a number of occasions to try to practice a tactic to see whether it would work. They came to the conclusion that, yes, it could work, but there's a real risk that you're going to capsize, flip these vessels over, or that some of those on board decide to jump into the water, and then you've got a full-fledged rescue operation that needs to be launched.
Yeah.
So the politicians now have moved back from that particular tactic, and what they're talking about really is just more of the same. I've not heard anything from Rishi or anything from Liz Truss that's different to what Boris Johnson and Priti Patel have been offering.
The other thing that struck me sitting there, I mean, as you know, because you were kind enough to watch it, that we did them quite separately. It wasn't a debate in that sense with the two candidates, and I sat and listened to both of them carefully. And the thing that struck me first of all about Liz was that an analysis of what she said in Manchester Live last night was in effect concluding that to deal with it, they've got to get here, because what she wants to do is round up those who've broken the rules as well as the ones who are organising at great profit and then send them to Rwanda or somewhere else. But the logic of that is, therefore, they've got to get here first. They've got to cross the channel.
Yes. I mean, there's two ways that it could be done if you're talking about crossing the channel. One is a comprehensive agreement with the French, whereby any boats that come across, the people on board are picked up, then immediately returned to that side of the channel. That breaks the people smuggling model if you know that you're not going to get to the UK for much longer than just a very fleeting visit. However, they've tried that. The French are not going to sign up to that. No. So the next opportune or element that they could look at is the Rwanda policy. But that's being bogged down in the courts now through using
Let me interrupt.
ECHR.
No, crucial point, and I'll come to it in a moment, but just, again, for balance, the thing that struck me about Rishi's answer in that context was, you know, not one strike, not two strikes, but three strikes and you're out. Again, the implication is that this is going to continue. Then it's going to get to a point where if he's Prime Minister, he would act.
Yeah, he wants a narrower definition of what a refugee is. So at the moment, it's being judged on the European Convention of Human Rights, what an asylum seeker is. He wants the narrower definition, as adopted by the United Nations, of what a refugee is. He wants our courts to take that factor into account. However, what the courts have been doing is they've been sort of mindful of case law in Europe because we are signed up to the ECHR. Now, neither candidate is saying at this stage that they would pull out of that convention, only that they would consider it.
Exactly, and that's the crucial point I was going to say to you, because both of them, and again, we tested them on that, but we don't have time to run the whole programme. But it was, and also Liz when she was in Lee for the People's Forum. they both pledged to seeking to reform it, but for folk with a reasonable memory, that's exactly what Dave Cameron tried to do with the European Union writ large, and we know where that ended. Europe won't reform. The European Court on Human Rights won't reform. This goes back to the 40s and the 50s, and yet neither of them will say, and if we get to that point, I'm out.
As we speak, we have what is called a British Bill of Rights going through Parliament. Now, once that gets its royal ascension, becomes law, then we're told that that will enable the British courts to be cognizant of the fact that, the Supreme Court is the highest body, that they don't have...
But with one crucial corollary, and that is, you say, we've now got the British equivalent of the Human Rights Charter. Therefore, we will formally depart, rescind, revoke our membership of the existing one.
They won't do that, though.
No, they won't.
And so the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, in the sense that we've got to see how the courts use the new legislation that's come through and whether that is something that they can be guided by, and we stop what is happening time and time again, which is lawyers are using the European Convention on Human Rights, the right to family life and that kind of thing, to stop foreign national offenders, immigration offenders from being returned to their home country.
Quite extraordinary. You not only make very, very good filmed reports, but you give very good conversation on these matters. Thank you for being so informed and in touch and so candid about it all as well, Mark. Great to see you, and thank you for agreeing to my invitation to break into your Saturday.
How could I not?
There you go. I hope you helped. I hope you found that helpful in understanding what is going on. But I think what both of us are saying as genuinely impartial journalists is you've got two candidates who want to be leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister of this country who are at odds in a big way on an incredibly sensitive issue of policy with their own party. Watch this space. Mark White there, GB News Home Affairs and Security Editor. Now, since that frightening night of February the 24th, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we on this programme and we at GB News have stuck with that story. The moves and the plays on the big battlefield picture, the whispers, the attempted deals and the notable absences in the diplomatic and political corridors of power. We've highlighted the echoes, too, of President Trump on NATO and the impact that's had on European defence spending and how it's all impacted on the post-Brexit power structure of Europe. We've also covered what many of you have done to get help and aid to the people of Ukraine and how many of you have taken in refugees. So, nearly 6 months on, we're reflecting on why we got involved, the state of the strategy on the ground, how, when and why we might disengage. I took a big and conscious decision about my next two guests because I wanted them to join me, two friends who literally have their fingerprints all over our coverage because they've been with me so many times in conversation. First up and sitting here live in the studio is Nick Gowing, who has been on many, many times and is an old friend of mine going right back to the ITN and the Channel 4 news days. And also joining us down the line is Rear Admiral Chris Parry, who he won't mind my saying is a new friend. We didn't know each other particularly beforehand, but he's become someone I trust and admire as a result of the work that we've tried to do together in helping you understand what is going on. And I want to start with you, Chris, if I may, and then bring Nick into it. But first and foremost, as a former top military man, what is your assessment of the military state of play on the ground right now?
Alastair, before I answer that question, I want to say I'm in Wales at the moment, and here in Wales we say that old friends are like gold, new friends are like silver. We value both. So on the ground in Ukraine today, what we're looking at now, I think, is the situation we had in 2014 after Russia achieved its initial gains. I think Russia's exhausted at the moment. It needs to recoup. The Ukrainians are very buoyant, and I liken it very much to a lower league team 2-0 up against a Premier League team. The Premier League team right now is looking for hard time to regroup, refresh itself and try and come back for a better second half. And I think what we're looking at is a decided stalemate. The Ukrainians aren't really strong enough to go on to a major offensive right now. The Russians don't want to really do that either. And I think it's settling down for the winter, to tell you the truth.
Stuff. Nick, what's your take on that? I explained at the beginning that our relationship goes back to your diplomatic correspondent, but you've covered more wars than I've had hot dinners as well. What's your assessment?
It's very sinister where we are. I agree with Chris completely. Hi, Chris, again. This is a very serious development where we are now. I remember sitting here back in February and March saying this is going to be a very long haul. It is going to be a very long haul, and the former Chief of Defence Intelligence, Jim Hockenhull, four-star general, who's now head of Strategic Command, has said very publicly, unusually, this is going to last a very long time. At the moment, no one can win, and I agree with Chris. This is now a stalemate. Neither side can push for victory at the moment, even to the point of forcing negotiations.
Yeah.
And over time, the Ukrainians are building new capacity. More worrying is that the Russians are getting weaker. They have lost a large number of people, anything between 25 to 50,000, whether dead or injured, maybe even more, at a time when there's disillusionment within the military. They've lost 100 colonels. They've lost a dozen generals. Things are not going well. It cannot be achieved by kinetic force, in other words, the hardware. And the really worrying thing for all of us 6 months on is that this is the summer when they could have made big progress. Yes. Winter is coming, and my final point, which we have to underline, the Gerasimov doctrine, the Chief of Staff, Valery Gerasimov, said in 2013, our strategy now is chaos. And that's boomeranging back onto us with gas, with electricity, with inflation, and what is happening in many countries. So this is a long haul. It's going to be very, very, very uncomfortable.
Chris ended his comment, and I'll come back to him in just a second, saying, it's now the winter and in wars, whether either side want it, that is the case. We know that Erdogan is really upping his game and trying to make Turkey a key player, which you've also talked about. The UN, our mutual friend Mark Seddon saying, where's the UN? They've finally emerged in quite a big way right now. Is there a parallel going on here? Is there a genuine, credible diplomatic effort to use the window that Chris just described?
No, I mean, what's quite remarkable is that the grain supplies are leaving Odessa and the southern coast still, and I'm quite surprised by that, not least the danger of mines, and Chris is a former admiral. So it's quite remarkable that's happening, and there appears to be some understanding on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which is also quite remarkable.
Yeah.
But I suspect the Russians are saying, actually, this is the biggest nuclear plant in Europe. We can't afford to have another Chernobyl.
So no diplomatic optimism?
There's nothing going on diplomatically at the moment.
Let's move the conversation on again then. The next thing I wanted to ask you, Chris, if I may, and you may have been kind enough to watch, but if you weren't, last weekend we had Lesia on, who's one of our regular friends, Ukrainian MP. You know her well, brilliant woman, who can handle a gun herself as well, as she's often told us with great pride. In interview with me, she said not once but twice, if the West maintains its flow of weapons and hardware, we can win. Now, you've made your point clear about that on many occasions. I'm not asking you now to say, can they win, can't they win? You've already addressed that. But I want you to interpret, if you would, and then Nick, what you think the message was that she was trying to get out through us. If the West continue its flow of weapons and hardware, will be on the upside.
Yes, I think Ukrainians, to keep their own morale going and to keep support going from the free world, needs to keep momentum going in the campaign, which is why you're seeing a decided propaganda and military push around Kherson at the moment. They have to keep telling people they're in the game, they're not on the back foot, and they can win. Now, I'm not sure the Ukrainians or indeed anybody knows what victory looks like in Ukraine right now. And we also don't know what the Ukrainians would settle for in peace talks. People have talked of the winter war with Finland that the Soviet Union had back in 1939-40. Finland had to give up territory for that, but actually also had to give up its aligned status. So it had to become neutral. So what does victory look like? I think is something that is a bit of a chimera at the moment. Winning for the Ukrainians is not losing, frankly, and they need to keep telling the free world that.
Let me just press you on the bit in the middle of that, and that is whether or not they can win, but the degree to which she was issuing a wake-up call. She made no criticism of the United Kingdom and the Minister of Defence, and Nick's written eloquently recently about training on Salisbury Plain and that side of it. Are there other allies of Ukraine who are beginning to go a bit cool on the military side of the support?
Oddly enough, it's not the military side, it's the political military side. I think certain countries are pretty weak about it. And I think that the free world has to be solid here. It is absolutely the front line in Ukraine right now. So is Taiwan in the coming battle between authoritarian states and the free world. And if we allow the authoritarian states to get their way either in Ukraine or Taiwan, we will be fighting them ourselves in future. We're already on the top edge of strategic competition, and many people have said Ukraine and Taiwan are proxy wars. That's not the case yet, to tell you the truth, but we are in strategic competition, and this is an expression of that competition that we cannot afford to lose.
There is no challenge greater, if you're the Polish government, than Ukraine. But if you're the American government, he's absolutely right. These things move on. Suddenly there are other bigger, greater threats. And if you are Lesia, the Ukrainian MP, that's deeply worrying.
These are sinister times for all of us. Everyone in Britain has to understand that we are under threat as well. When you hear that the Brits are short of ammunition, partly because they've been shifting them all to Ukraine, the real challenge now is it's all very well having Ukrainian troops training in Salisbury and in Yorkshire and so on. They will go back. There'll be an enhanced conventional capability. But the Russians see this as a threat to what they've got in eastern Ukraine. And the deeply sinister time which is approaching is that they may use theatre nuclear weapons to actually remove,
the ultimate chaos,
destroy the Ukrainian force that we are helping to create. And there is also evidence, I don't have it on first hand, that actually there's very active military support for the Ukrainians strategically and tactically. And that is going to enrage the Russians, enrage Putin. This is now something where he is prepared to extend his influence and extend his threats. He's playing this long, even if he's destroyed a large part of eastern Ukraine.
As a former admiral, Chris, and a very, very senior planner, do you take the nuclear threat seriously?
Yes, I think we always have to when there are nuclear weapons in play. The one thing that worries me, Alistair, and should worry everybody, is we've got Russia, China, Iran all talking about using nuclear weapons as war fighting, not deterrent weapons. I think my own view is there is only one circumstance where he would use nuclear weapons, and the Ukrainians have to be careful here, is if he were going to lose Crimea. The one bit of territory that I think Putin would really fight over is Ukraine. And so they have to be very careful around Kherson at the moment and the way they're dealing with Crimea, because if he lost every other inch of territory in Ukraine, the one area he would not give up, this is Putin, is the sovereign base in Sevastopol and the predominantly Russian area of Crimea. That is something I think that could cue a nuclear response. If the Ukrainians either isolate or threaten to invade Crimea, I think that is the bottom line for Putin on nuclear weapon use.
Chris, great to talk to you. Thank you for breaking into your Saturday to reflect upon these matters. And you keep in touch. As you well know, you're always welcome on this programme. Final point to you, be it Crimea or the master plan. One of the first things you said when you came as a guest on this programme is that we could and should have seen this coming 2 decades ago.
2 decades ago, it was made clear by Putin in the 2007 Munich Security Conference that this is what he was planning to do. What's interesting is Jim Hockenhull, I'm quoting him again, 4-star general, said they were aware in November of precisely, and he was Chief of Defence Intelligence then, of exactly what was being planned. It was the same for the CIA. The CIA director, Bill Burns, went to Moscow and said, this is what you're going to do. But just to pick up on one particular point, this is now about stalemate. It is equivalent to what's happening between North and South Korea, and that's been going on for 50 years. And that's what's so gloomy about all of this, and it's going to affect all of us.
You're going to have to be back in 6 months' time for a year, aren't you? There you go. For the time being, Nick Gowing, it is always a pleasure to see you. And Chris, if you haven't unplugged yet, thank you too. You're both always welcome on the programme. Thank you. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. After the break, we'll be continuing our conversation on education, and we'll have much more, including, is it a good time to sell your motor? And if it is, what's the best way of doing that? But as we inch towards 1 o'clock, we'll take a quick short break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. It is exactly 2 minutes past 1. And hello and welcome back if you've been kind enough to be with us since 12 o'clock. I am Alastair Stewart and we're into our final hour of the programme, where we will be keeping you company on TV and radio, with plenty more still to come. Continuing our conversation on education, whether universities are fit for purpose, with a brilliant witness, a woman who decided to go a different route and made a huge and profound success of it. We'll also be talking about how you can save money at home, on your car and indeed on your fuel. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the headlines so far today. Here's Tatiana.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The travel disruption continues on mainline trains today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of the UK rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Some train services will also be affected on Sunday by the aftermath of today's strike action. Well, yesterday saw little to no services running on the London Tube, whilst most buses across west and southwest of the capital were also cancelled. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its handling and firing almost 800 workers earlier this year. That's according to the Insolvency Service. The firm sparked backlash after it sacked staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng asked the Insolvency Service to carry out an urgent inquiry into whether the law had been broken. There are no outstanding criminal proceedings, but a civil investigation is ongoing. Dockers are due to strike at the port of Felixstowe, the UK's largest container shipping port, tomorrow. The strike, which is over workers' pay, is due to last 8 days. The Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company had offered workers a £500 lump sum on top of a 7% pay rise, but around 1,900 members of the Unite union have rejected this offer.
The RPI is running now at 12.3%. If you accept 7%, then your standard of living goes down by 5.3%. And as for the £500, it's an insult, because if you do your maths and you take away the national insurance increase that the government have foisted upon us, and also the income tax, you end up roughly with just over £300.
Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Tory leader. Writing in The Times, he accused Foreign Secretary Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut tax to ease the rising cost of living. The former cabinet minister also said he won't be returning to frontline politics. Meanwhile, the two candidates vying to be Prime Minister have outlined their plans for policing. While speaking at the GBNews hustings in Manchester last night, Rishi Sunak called for the Justice Secretary to be put in charge of parole boards to prevent political correctness from affecting sentencing decisions. He also gave his support for stop and search powers to tackle knife crime. Meanwhile, Liz Truss said officers should be more focused on tackling crime on the streets rather than on social media.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
Stop and search is the thing that we know makes an enormous difference. It's actually the powers that we are trialling in other areas in the country that allow the police to stop and search previously convicted knife criminals.
A 23-year-old man has been charged with the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester. Lewis Jones has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of abduction. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later today. The victim has since been safely reunited with her family. Weeks of drought in Europe have led to lower than normal water levels in rivers and lakes, but it's also unveiled treasures that have remained hidden for many years. Well, in Spain, water levels have reached so low that it's revealed a prehistoric stone circle dubbed the Spanish Stonehenge. It's been hidden since the 1960s as the area was turned into a reservoir. Meanwhile, in Serbia, the river Danube has fallen to one of its lowest levels in almost a century and exposes the hulk of more than 20 German warships that were sunk during the Second World War. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Tatiana, thanks very much indeed. We're going to return to our top stories now. A-levels, universities, are they fit for purpose and the rest of it? I asked you for your thoughts upon the matter, and you have been up and at it, for which thank you very much indeed. I'm going to start with Patrick, who says industries need vocational as well as graduate people. We sacrifice vocational education to the stupidity of academic ambition for more professorships. Violet joins the conversation and says, in my opinion, it should take hard work and good grades to get in. So the top minds get in, doctors, specialists and such like. We shouldn't need universities, however, for things like nursing. We never used to. I've heard of nurses saying, I didn't go to university to empty bedpans, so why choose nursing then at all? I know that issue about graduate qualifications for nurses is a big issue, so I'm glad that, whether you agree or not the point, Violet raises it, and good for her. Ronnie says the indoctrination in schools peddling this, the world is your oyster once you come out of university, must be stopped. There are so many graduates with useless degrees and saddled with loans who won't be able to put bread upon their tables. And finally, I got one. This programme is called Alastair Stewart and Friends, and this last one that's just come through to me is from a very good friend of mine, Robert Vasquez, who lives and works in Gibraltar. Robert was at Bristol University with me doing law when I was trying to do economics. But interestingly, he's a QC, and then when he'd done enough with the law, he took a postgraduate course at City University in London, and now writes a brilliant blog. And he says the danger is that universities have become teaching institutions rather than learning institutions. Got a special guest coming up in a moment, but I asked Bobby to come back to reflect upon where we'd got up to in the conversation. And actually, those emails bring us right up to date with what we were talking about when we finished the first chunk of the conversation. And it's the fine balance, as my friend Robert Vasquez said, between going to university to learn or to be taught. And secondly, what all of them are saying here is you need to know what you need a degree for and what you don't need a degree for.
Yeah, again, if we look at things in a sort of purely utilitarian, what is it for? Is university just to produce our doctors of the future, our teachers, our engineers? In which case, then you can say, if there's no economic value added, then that course shouldn't be produced. But we had a brief discussion before the break about actually there's the other side of university, which the social capital. But again, life shouldn't be just seen as like, was it in one of Charles Dickens, he talks about the David Copperfield, the Micawber principle.
Yes.
Income, £20, expenditure 21, misery. If it's income 20, expenditure 19, happiness.
Yeah.
Life shouldn't just be about balance sheets and accounting.
And if you study economics at university level, you do calculus about tiny kinks in curves.
Yes.
But actually, Mr. Micawber's principle would do you a lot more good if you're using economics in the real world.
Exactly. So if we put Mr. Micawber aside for 1 second, there's the value of actually the social benefit of young people having 3-4 years where they can discover themselves, learn about their hobbies, interests, set themselves up for life. Because remember, life is a long, 80, 90 years old, we're going to live up to.
Yeah. But when you were at Cambridge, you were a great debater and you joined lots of societies. And one time I met up with you socially recently was when you and my daughter were both doing TED Talks in I think it was Surbiton?
Kingston,
that's right.
That's right.
And I was sitting back thinking, this guy's brilliant at mathematics and he's great fun and I love chatting to him at parties and things like that. But my God, you can speak publicly as well. You weren't born with that.
Not at all.
Did you learn it at school or university?
Probably university.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of people, even with my mathematics, people often talk about, is there a maths brain? Are you born with an inclination? Of course, there's a bell curve of talent. But I think with most things, we can develop our skills. And again, universities are a great place for that.
But you said in the first conversation that you knew that in your early teens.
Yes.
That was something that Bobby Seagull just knew himself. I want to finish before I bring my next guest in, who I've warned you about, and I want you to listen to what she's got to say, and then we'll come back and have our final bite of it. But I was really, really taken by what Violet said. In my opinion, it should take hard work and good grades to get in, so the top minds get in, doctors, specialists and such like. But we shouldn't need university for things like nursing. Now, many people, that's not judgmental or dismissive, because a lot of people that I've spoken to about that say, look, in the old days, you did a nursing course, you were in residence, you learned all that skill set, and it was driven by the fact that you wanted to be a caring, informed person. Why do we feel the need as a society to pin degrees as a qualification point to so many occupations?
Yeah, again, possibly this stems from when Blair in 97 said education, education, education. We need to get 50% of our young people in. So there's been a drive towards any sort of vocational qualification, squeezing it into a university degree. So maybe that's not always the right path.
Yeah, but I mean, using the need for a degree as a way of thinning out who can get in and who can't get in, it seems to me to be a nonsense.
Yeah, I think
we may come back to that or we may not, but it's a perfect segue to say, thank you to Bobby, but to bring in Sian Coley. Now, I've spoken to her mysteriously twice so far, and there she is. And unlike Seagull, this is your first time on telly, so chill out, enjoy it. It's not a gotcha moment. I genuinely, as does Bobby and folk at home, we just want to hear your story. You're a shift manager. Is it CEVA or SEVA?
SEVA.
Right, SEVA logistics. And how would you describe, I'll come to that in some detail, but first of all, how would you describe your own experience at school when you were working out what you were good at, what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, I think, I enjoyed school, and I think school is great, and I was always considered, academic, and I really enjoyed learning. But I think once I sort of got to the end of my A-levels, I really felt that burnout, and, I just thought this full-time teaching and learning style doesn't suit me anymore. And I think we've seen that even this week in A-level results, that the pressure that is put on people at A-level sort of stage is very, very difficult to sort of deal with and comprehend with at that age.
Absolutely fascinating insight. And then lo and behold, there you are. And you develop from somewhere this desire to work in warehousing, logistics. We often talk on this programme about logistics, whether it's that great big ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal, screwing up everything being delivered to our supermarkets. And it is, the shortage of lorry drivers and what have you. But at what point did you personally think, yeah, that's what I'd really like to do. I'd like to have a go at that.
Yeah, I think logistics is sort of an industry of huge success and opportunity. And I think, especially during COVID, we saw the importance of logistics as an industry for the UK. But I think for me personally, it started sort of the second year of my A-levels. So my dad works in logistics, and I did a business A-level and operations. Within that were always my best modules. HR wasn't my thing and finance wasn't my thing, but operations was what I was good at, and sort of that logical approach, problem solving. And that's really where I saw myself, and I thought, I think this is the industry for me.
Yeah, and again, thank you for that. And Bobby Seagull's head was going up and down, as was mine when you said that bit. And it's it's the hybrid nature of what you did when you went to college, where you were studying, and whether you like HR or not, you will have won the hearts and minds of many people in saying, oh, they just get in the way the whole time. But the idea of how you run a warehouse, how you do lists of people, how many you need in at various times, and the rest of it, but also studying the theory of it. They got the course right for you, or did you get the course right for you?
I think it's a combination of both, really. I think the course is great. It's what I wanted to do. But I think hybrid learning is a really great option for a lot of people that don't think full-time learning is for them, but still really value the importance of that degree. And, for me, I did my A-levels, I did my GCSEs. I enjoy the academics. And that doesn't mean I don't value the importance of a degree. Full-time learning just wasn't the best option for me anymore. And also, I think it's massively important how competitive graduate schemes can be. I was going to do a business degree. Business graduate schemes are some of the most competitive in the market. And I thought that practical learning style of, I get practical experience 4 days a week and I get that theory side 1 day a week that I really think is important, makes me the most well-rounded sort of graduate that I can be once I get to that final point in a couple of years' time.
Oh, I think we're there already, don't we? Shall we share something with people? Because you've now... I love that. Just giggles quietly, because I think she maybe knows what I'm going to say next. You're in management, aren't you? You're up the ladder. You're nearly at the top of it already, but you're into management now. So not only was it a brilliant battle plan, but my God, you were good at it as well.
Yeah, so, I was promoted sort of during the pandemic, and I think that was a really tough time for everybody, but it was especially tough sort of going into my first full-time role and taking that transition. And there was a transition period and it was tough. It was definitely not easy, but I think I have a passion for what I do, and I've been really lucky to find the right job for me quite early in my career. And I think sort of the industry that I'm in, supporting our customers, it drives me every day to sort of be that little bit better than I was yesterday.
Well, millions of people, I'm sure, are enormously grateful for what you and people like you do to keep those, whether it's the shelves in the supermarket or the spare tyres at one of those repair companies going, that is what you do. I'm going to ask you a cheeky one at the end, and if you want to say mind your own business or bat me away, I genuinely won't be offended. But if currently it's the Education Secretary is a lovely bloke called James Cleverly, who may still be the Education Secretary once we have a new leader of the Conservative Party and a new Prime Minister, or it may be somebody else. Whoever that person is, be it James or someone else, if they picked the phone up to you this afternoon and said, I heard you talking to Alistair about how it all worked out for you and how you made further and higher education work for you and are now in management, what's the one thing that you would do if actually you were the Education Secretary to help other young men and young women like yourself get to where you want to be and make a success of it? What would that one thing be?
I would promote vocational apprenticeships to the same extent that they do university, whether that be adding them onto UCAS and using sort of more of a streamlined approach, because, even when I completed my A-levels only 2 or 3 years ago now, degree apprenticeships were not put on the same pedestal that university is. And to be honest, I don't believe that they still are. I think, you have to apply to each company individually. It's time consuming, as well as doing your A-levels, as well as applying to uni. I still applied to go to uni full time. It's overwhelming and it takes its toll. And I think degree apprenticeships, out of that three combination of things, will be the thing that's ignored. I think streamlining the approach for degree apprenticeships, vocational learning, that's what I would ask them to do, because that's what they deserve. And university is great for some people, but it's not great for everybody.
Sian, you're a star. Lovely meeting you. And thanks for breaking into your afternoon. And I'm glad your dad does what he does, and I'm glad that you followed in his brilliant footsteps. You take care and keep in touch with us. Thank you for sharing time with us. Sian Coley there, shift manager at Seagull Logistics. What a total star. I'm not going to do the first half of it because, in effect, she confirmed quite brilliantly what your theory was earlier on about horses for courses and so on. But that last bit is gold dust. Engaging young people like her in the design and execution of courses that suits what her employer wants and what she wants.
Yes, and she was talking about design, about the apprenticeship degrees. Again, at school, as a teacher, we're told, oh, let's talk about A-levels, university, degrees, but there are other options out there. And I feel as if there's almost like missing information, but two, things are not streamlined enough. Again, she was saying for her, she had applied to a particular organisation, another one, separate applications. So those applying to universities, they have a very simple UCAS application, whereas those applying for degree apprenticeship, like Sian has so brilliantly done, it's just a complex, convoluted process. So clearly, the people that are designing the pathways are not treating the pathways with equal respect. Yeah. That's what they need to be.
You've, apart from the mathematics thing, but you do write very well, and you've done a number of books on numeracy, but also you work in charities that promote numeracy, particularly for much younger people, so that they're in a reasonable position. You don't get involved in charities unless you're trying to achieve something, and that means lobbying government, it means lobbying ministers and heads and people like that. See, her whole thesis falls apart, as does yours and as does Tom's, if those people in power don't listen. And Liz Truss told me last night she wants ministers, if she wins, who really drive the agenda. Do you have any confidence today that you'll get that in education? That was a bit of a frown, Bobby.
Yeah, because I feel as if, again, most ministers, most senior politicians have gone to university, done the typical A-levels, undergraduate routes, perhaps masters, so they've not experienced degree apprenticeships, vocational qualifications, T-levels, etc. So I feel as if our MPs need to reflect our society better. That's the best way, because then when there are people that have been through Sian, one day, she could be an MP, they've actually gone through the different options, then they're more likely to reflect, I guess, the pathway through it.
I think I'm my final point too, because I'm now going to say thank you and have a great weekend. But that's why I think, and he's a friend of mine, and people who watch this programme know he's a friend of mine, but that's why it's so important that Robert Halfon is the chair of the Education Select Committee, because he is a working class lad, been there, done it, and he knows what makes these things tick. Bobby, great to see you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for breaking into the weekend. And we'll see you again very soon, I hope.
Sure. Thank you, Alistair.
God bless. Bobby Seagull there. Brilliant broadcaster, brilliant writer, maths teacher, and all of the rest of it. You know where to find him, and you will want to. Now, there's an interesting little segue following from that conversation, because it's also about what young people do in terms of work, and it's also what young people do if they are going to go to university in between. To the surprise of many, the Queen's granddaughter, Lady Louise Windsor, got her A-level results this week, and they are good enough for her to go to St Andrews University. What, for some obscure reason, other people found odd, is that she's been working in a local garden centre with duties such as pruning and potting plants and assisting customers. It's something that she wanted to do, and people had a go at her for it. I tweeted that I thought it was extraordinary that anyone should have a go at this young lady, and nearly 5,000 of you agreed with me. Hands off, she's just doing the right thing, bless her heart. I'm delighted to be joined now by another very good friend of mine, the great royal commentator, Jenny Bond, and there she is. Goodness me, what was that all about? Is it just because somebody was lucky enough to get a picture of Louise doing the pruning bit?
It was so mean-spirited, wasn't it, to criticise her for doing her job quietly, by all accounts very politely and courteously, for the minimum wage, Obviously, she's a wealthy young woman. She doesn't have to work, but all credit to her. I agree with you, Alistair. You know, she's just getting on with life, rather as her mother has, humbly helping out the community, which is what Sophie's done a great deal during the pandemic, and without any bells attached to it or any publicity. I think she's a delightful young lady, Lady Louise, and all credit to her.
I'm not accusing them of being remotely cynical, because I happen to agree with you. I think both Edward and Sophie would have said, if that's what you want to do, great, go for it, absolutely. But in terms of the brand that the Prince of Wales is trying to develop, and you and I have talked about this many times, and what William and Catherine are trying to develop, this is absolutely on the money for the royal family if it's going to survive into the next 50, 100 years.
Yeah, it is. There's not going to be enough room for an extended royal family. It's not what Prince Charles wants, so they're going to have to find their own way and get work experience and get jobs. It's not easy if you're a member of the royal family, even if you're, I think she's 13th in line to the throne. I mean, you know, she's never going to be on the throne. She's never going to be queen. She's never going to be a senior member of the royal family in any way, actually, Lady Louise. But she is royal. You can't get away from it. And I think that Sophie and Edward have brought her up to be as normal as possible. She's been very private. She's had difficulties. She was born with a sight defect, and that had required surgery. I don't think that part of her life's been particularly easy. But by all accounts, she's very clever. Her mother herself has said she's really quite clever, is what Sophie said. She's got herself to one of the top universities in the country. And I think she'll thrive there.
The great St Andrews University, where my father was an undergraduate as well, will say, oh, not another royal. They seem to be forming an orderly queue. Jenny, while you've been kind enough to join us, I must put one other little story to you, and it's not heavy-duty stuff at all. It just really amused me over breakfast as I read it this morning. Reports emerging, I think to their credit, it's the Daily Mail, saying that Her Majesty the Queen does not need sat-nav to get round Sandringham or Balmoral or Windsor, but she does refer to the sat-nav, according to her staff, as the lady under the bonnet, and it makes them all laugh.
Yeah, it's a good August story, isn't it? It's probably true. I mean, she does have a great sense of humour, the Queen, and so, yes, you can just hear her saying, oh, there's that lady under the bonnet again. Yeah. My mother, it reminded my mother, actually, my mother was descending into dementia, which clearly there's no such thing with the Queen. The Queen's just being amusing, but my mother found the sat-nav most confusing and sort of said, well, where is she? Where is she? I can't see her.
Well, I can share that, and also the arguments that it generates within motor cars, where people say, I'm still absolutely convinced that we should go this way and not that way, but there we are. Jenny, on the Wessex story, thank you for that. You and I, as not for the first time, agree 100% on it, and good luck to Lady Louise and Edward and Sophie there as Louise goes about her studies at the lovely St Andrews University. For the meantime, lovely to see you, and thank you for breaking into your weekend to come and talk to us. Jenny Bond, thank you. Always a star. And very thoughtful. Hands off. If they're doing the right thing, just let them get on with it. If you have a view on it, then do get in touch. Some of you already have done. Mary says, I say good on her. That's Lady Louise. At least she's getting out there and doing something. And here comes the sting. Unlike some members of the royal family. Boomf. Anne says, don't Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall, who are Princess Anne's children, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie all have jobs? Yes, I think they probably do. I mean, I know for a fact that Zara Tyndall's job is riding horses rather well in three-day eventing and winning Olympic medals. And Peter Phillips runs a riding centre and also sets up big shows. And I think the girls do, Duke of York's girls do also have jobs. More power to the young lady, I do beg your pardon, gets this one. I don't have an author on it, but never mind. Sorry? Gavin says, more power to the young lady for having the backbone to go out and do some real work. Nicely put, Gavin, and I'm sorry I couldn't see your name initially. Do keep those views coming in. We do try and share as many as we can. We're 32 minutes before we go off air, so with a little bit of luck, we'll have a couple of minutes at the very end to talk about either the royal family or Ukraine or education or whatever you like. And do subscribe as well to our YouTube channel, where you can catch up on all of our interviews and indeed all of our previous programmes. We are at GB News. Plenty more to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends after this. this break, we'll be speaking to our reporter about the latest on the rail strikes that have been affecting so many of us this week. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weekend weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking wet in places as a band of rain moves across the north, with showers in the south. Let's take a look. After a wet morning across Scotland, this afternoon should be brighter, but still with plenty of showers around. It'll also be blustery and cool in the west. Northern Ireland will have a much drier afternoon with some sunny spells developing. Mostly dry, but there's still the chance of a shower. The band of rain will still be across northern England this afternoon, accompanied by some strong winds. It will also be blustery across Wales, especially along the coast, with some showers in the south. Northern parts of the country will be drier though. The Midlands will see an afternoon of sunshine and showers. Some of the showers could be heavy, but it will still feel warm for this time of the year. Showers may also affect northern parts of East Anglia, but further south it will be mostly dry. There will be cloud around, which is expected to disperse later. Apart from a few showers, much of southern England should have a pleasant afternoon, with a mix of cloud and sunshine and temperatures reaching between 22 and 25 degrees. Heading into this evening, and the band of rain continues to move south, with further showers in the northwest, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's 1:32. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The travel disruption continues on mainline trains today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of the UK rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Some train services will also be affected on Sunday by the knock-on effect of today's strike action. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its handling in firing almost 800 workers earlier this year. That's according to the Insolvency Service. The firm sparked backlash after it sacked staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. There are no outstanding criminal proceedings, but a civil investigation is ongoing. Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader. Writing in The Times, he accused Foreign Secretary Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut tax to ease the rising cost of living. The former Cabinet Minister also said he won't be returning to frontline politics. A 23-year-old man has been charged with the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester. Lewis Jones has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of abduction. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later today. The victim has since been safely reunited with her family. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. Welcome back to Alastair Stewart and Friends. It is very nearly 25 minutes to 1, and you are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. Now, football fans are among those facing travel disruption today, as more than 45,000 rail workers take part in further strike action over pay and conditions. Network Rail said that only 20%, 1 in 5 of trains would run, with multiple operators across the country being affected. So let's speak once again to GB News Scotland correspondent Davy Donaldson, who is outside Edinburgh's wonderful Waverley station with the latest. Davy, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad, Alistair. Obviously, we've got the Fringe Festival on here, so it's going to have a huge impact in terms of people being able to get into shows and, more importantly, get home again, because the last train services here leave Edinburgh at 6:30 at night. We've only got 11 routes across the country that are actually running, all of them in the Central Belt, Fife and the Borders, so not much going on here in terms of train services, but certainly much going on with the Fringe because people want to come and see it. I think people today have probably come in earlier, do an early show and then get out of Edinburgh on that last train at 6:30, which I think is going to be pretty packed, but it's the same up and down the country, as you say. Just 20% of rail services running, which is really making it impossible for people to get around. You talked about the football matches there, you talk about the festivals. That's going to be very, very difficult for people to attend these. Some people will probably just decide, you know what, let's not bother, and you can understand them for doing that. The other problem we've got is tomorrow morning, some of the lines will go on automatically, some of the points go on automatically, but most of them have to be manually turned on, and that will take time. So you're going to see it tomorrow morning as well in terms of more cancellations and more delays. So it doesn't look good. And as for an end to the strike, there certainly doesn't seem to be one coming anytime soon.
And when you joined us earlier on, Davy, you were talking to one of the guys from the RMT, and while you were just giving that answer, we were seeing some of the picture of the picket lines. I mean, he made it crystal clear to you that at the moment, in the union mind, there's no end to this in sight.
It doesn't look that way. You know, speaking to Mick Hogg from the RMT earlier on, he certainly said that they were a long, long way away. So I think it's going to be more misery for commuters and people trying to get out and get to work and go about their business, because they're so far apart at the moment, you know, and it doesn't seem that it's going to be resolved anytime soon.
All right, Davy, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. David Donaldson there, our Scotland correspondent. And this is one of those very difficult decisions to make, because if you haven't seen it, then you won't be remotely offended. But if, unfortunately, you did catch on that sign behind Davy, nothing to do with us at all, there was an obscene word. And if you did spot it, then we apologise. We hadn't noticed it and perhaps should have done. But as I say, it wasn't our fault, but there we are. And if you didn't spot it, I wish I'd never mentioned it. That's the latest there from David Donaldson, GB News Scotland correspondent. Now, we've always on this programme tried to help you in the cost of living crisis. We call it our summer savings feature, where we look at how you at home can make savings to help with the cost of all sorts of things. We did mobile telephony last weekend, and today we are turning our attention towards motor cars. One of the most cost-effective ways of both buying and indeed selling a car. How can people like you save on things like insurance and fuel? And I'm delighted to say that joining me now is Quentin Wilson to answer those questions and more. The great motoring journalist and a man who's kind enough to very often appear on our programmes. This cropped up at home, Quentin, with my number 3 son, who was getting to that point, which seems to come more rapidly with him than most, that it was time to sell the motor car. And he was talking about car sales websites that I'd never heard of before, and only 1 or 2 I'd seen advertised on television. And he said, it's the way most people do it now. Is that the wise way to go forward?
He's right in the sense that when you and I were younger, Alistair, a long time ago, you put your car in the local paper and nice people came and you haggled, you did a deal, they paid you in cash or a banker's fine. But now there's too much risk to that. And if you're selling and putting your telephone number on internet sites and things, people are feeling uncomfortable about this. So there are companies who will, and you know what their names are, who will come and they will car. And there's even one where they get lots of dealers to compete against each other to give you the best price. So this is an easy way. And the old days of waiting in for people who say they're going to come and don't come and all that sort of stuff, they're gone. So most people will sell their car by going to one of these buying websites, and you probably get less than you would in an ideal sale with a private person. But the risks and the time and opportunity costs are much, much less. Caveat there. You need to make sure you describe the car accurately and tell them all about your curbed wheels and your scratches and make sure the service history is all stamped up. Otherwise, when you get there, they will chip you on the price. But in terms of ease, it's by far the best way of doing things.
How absolutely fascinating. And the old-fashioned language that you and I also grew up with, one careful owner, that's not good enough. You've actually got to be able to prove it. Is it also a good way of buying a car? Because, again, we're both dancing on the head of a pin now, but people listening to us chatting will know, because they will have seen the adverts on television, so we all know who and what we're talking about. But if you get to that point, having got rid of the old motor, now is the time to replace it. So you go into that marketplace. Is it also a good, safe and reliable place to buy a car?
Well, I would advise people always to buy from a dealer because you get a warranty. Now, private sales, you have no rights at all. You buy the car as seen. You've got basic consumer rights that it's got to be fit for its purpose. But you know, going to court is a nightmare. So if you've got a dealer, they will give you a warranty. They have to stand by certain things. They will check the car over for outstanding finance, for accident damage, things like that. And you are much safer to do that. And as long as you check the dealer out on Trustpilot and see that they've got lots and lots of positive reviews, you're going to be pretty safe. But I wouldn't advise that you know the person, friends, families, work colleagues, to buy a car privately these days. It's sad but true.
Yeah, and the warranty bit, I 100% agree with you from personal experience. The team warned you that there were two other issues that I wanted to just touch upon briefly, and we've got a few minutes left, I'm delighted to say, because they really do matter crucially to folk out there. The first is the price of fuel, be it petrol or diesel, and we know that the wholesale price is slowly coming down, much faster in America, oddly enough, but it's slowly coming down here. And the little local petrol pump guys and gals seem to be doing a much better job of cutting the prices quickly than some of the big supermarkets. What are the tips for finding the most sharply and competitively priced fuel?
Well, the main one is don't drive around using lots of fuel to find the cheapest fuel. You know, and that's what a lot of people do. I mean, it's sad. You know, I spent 12 years fighting with the government and with the oil companies to keep fuel duty down. And it's a battle we won't win. And the supermarkets used to have these promotions where they kept fuel prices down, but that's not happening so much now. So, you know, you've got to watch it. There's a great site called petrolprices.com, which will tell you the actual prices of pumps near you. But the real important thing is to just not use so much. Now, if you drive carefully and don't punch the pedals like a prize fighter and don't accelerate up to the lights and then brake, you can save as much as 25% on your fuel bills. So you've got to drive like the district nurse. And there's a really useful little thing on all cars called a trip computer. And that will tell you your MPG, your average MPG. If you set that, you can see how much more you're getting by driving carefully. Yeah. And it's really quite amazing.
Yeah, and I think if they Google you and that issue, you did a brilliant column in one of the newspapers that you write for about exactly that. And if there are district nurses watching and listening to our conversation, he meant it as a compliment, not as a criticism, because you're saving more money than we are. The final one, which is the second largest expense for any motor car owner, is insurance. Is it as good to go on to the price comparison websites, or is it best, because it's, again, not a thing you want to get wrong, because it really is a crucial matter, go to a broker or go on to a comparison site? What would your recommendation be?
I would try both and compare the one against the other. I mean, the comparison sites, we know they get kickbacks from insurance companies, and it's not a completely transparent system. So they're making profit out of you. It will give you a benchmark figure, and then if you know or can get hold of a broker to say, right, run the same for me and see the cheapest you can get, then then you've got both sets of prices to work on. Make sure you go with the biggest, the most reliable insurers, because you can get a deal, but then there may be restrictions on mileage, and the cover might not be as good, because you want, in an accident, you want the best cover, legal protection, windscreen protection, all that sort of stuff as you can. So cutting corners might be a false economy.
Yeah, very, very wise advice, as always. Quentin Wilson, genuinely always a pleasure to talk to you, because I enjoy it, but also, as I say, great wisdom there as well. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great weekend. And just to repeat something, as Quentin said, tongue-in-cheek, drive like a district nurse. That wasn't sexist or nasty. It was really good advice. And if you Google Quentin Wilson, and there are 2 L's in Wilson on the website, and fuel-saving tips, you will find his brilliant column. And some of it is blindingly obvious, but you don't do it, and it's a blindingly obvious way to save money. That's what we're all about. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, we will be concluding today's conversation on education. More of your emails and the thoughts of a very good friend of mine and of this programme. That's Tony Breslin, so don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. If you've been good enough to be with us since noon, you will well know that we've been talking a lot about education. My guests so far have been weighing up the options. Do students feel under too much pressure to go to university? What kind of quality of guidance do they get from their careers advisors when they're in school? Is the university interview system something that we should try and drag back to those who do choose to go to university rather than to do an apprenticeship or something else, really get their money's worth? Should we be encouraging perhaps more people to undertake apprenticeships and vocational courses? And should these qualifications be given higher social status? I'm delighted to be joined by my final guest and to give him, as it were, our final say, and indeed his. There it is. It's Tony Breslin, who is the director of the Breslin Policy Foundation Consultancy, and I want to find out what his view is. someone who has first-hand experience of working in the education system and also a great thinker and a great reformer. I want to start with something I was hinting at, Tony, there at the end, because I've thought about this long and hard, and it goes right back to when I was an undergraduate, and it is the problem of snobbery and a lack of education about the opportunities that are available in further and higher education. How big a problem do you see those two as?
I think it's deeply entrenched in our culture, essentially, that we have a disposition towards certain things and away from others. And we've always had a disposition, away from vocational and technical education. I rather prefer to call it professional education. But we tend not to give the same status to not just to particular areas of education, but to particular things. So engineering and so forth. And when we talk about vocational education, we often start by talking about it as something that's for those who are not good at academic education. Well, if you keep throwing naughty children car engines because you don't think they can handle a standard curriculum, you're never going to get the top-end engineers that we need as a society, because we've already kind of said, don't get your hands dirty. So we need to come right away from that set of attitudes. I don't think it's about whether young people go to a university or whether they do apprentices. It's about giving status to a whole range of work destinations and a whole range of professions.
I agree with that.
Saying, actually, you can study for any of these to the highest level.
But I'm going to butt in only to, as it were, underline. You hinted at it there, and I want more from you because you're my final say expert on it. And it came out with my conversation with Bobby Seagull, but also with the brilliant Sian, amazing young woman who's gone into logistics management. Her dad was a logistics manager, and she chose to do it, but she had to battle against the system to do it. It's the shout out to careers masters in our schools who will sit down and say, all right, Stuart, here are your options, and there should be, you may be good at economics, go to Cambridge, but do you know what? You may be good at economics, so go to Dyson and learn how to make a fortune out of vacuum cleaners. They've got to get their act together as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We do need both of those, but I think this issue is tainted by the backdrop that usually those people who say too many young people are going to university, usually they're talking about other people's children because they've been to university, their parents went to university, and their children and grandchildren will go to university. What we really need, if we're going to equal the status on this, we need middle-class professionals to encourage their children into engineering, into apprenticeships and into the range. Because in a sense, it's only when we get the advantaged rather than just the disadvantaged accessing the vocational and technical sphere, as I say, I prefer to call it the professional sphere, that we will get an equality of status. Now, I think at some levels that's beginning to happen because actually some students who are well equipped to go to university are now looking at things like student loans and debt and so forth, and they're thinking, well, actually, I can cut my own path, I can be entrepreneurial and so forth. My only regret with that is, as somebody who was the first in their family to go to university, it is a fantastic 3 years. A very good friend of mine, Ryan McMahon, who was the researcher on Lessons from Lockdown, said to me recently, he said, the thing is, Tony, I think every young person, whatever they go into, should have that 3-year experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you grow and you develop and so forth.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to see all kinds of young people experiencing that, whatever their abilities, whatever their final destinations and whatever their career desires.
You have a total ally, interestingly, in Bobby Seagull, who did mathematics at bachelor's degree level and at postgraduate level. And he said, yeah, that was all great and helped me when I went to Lehman Brothers and went into the city and became an accountant. But what I really learned at university was self-confidence, how to publicly speak, get involved in politics and all of the rest of it. You touched upon this area a moment ago, and I want to take you back to it as my penultimate question. And it is this. We're also a bit snobby in this country about talking openly about what industry and commerce need to go forward as we come out of COVID, come out of Brexit, avoid going into a deep recession. We do need to take a deep breath and say we need more electricians, we need more metal bashers, we need more plumbers, as well as classicists and English language students.
I completely agree, but I think some of these problems go right back to the wind down of the apprenticeship system, the old apprenticeship system in the 1980s, when we took a quick fix to youth unemployment with YTS. We diminished the value of apprenticeships, and we created a skills gap. And what actually happened, my father was a skilled manuals worker. What actually happened was the children of that generation of skilled manual workers got up the ladder, and many of them went to university and have done incredibly well. But we didn't create another group of skilled manual workers to succeed that group. So we've got this kind of unbalanced labour market where we've got unskilled jobs at one end, and we've got graduate jobs at the other, and we've left the hole in the middle. And of course, you know, you then get into the whole thing of drawing in plumbers and so forth from other countries. And we know, whatever the views on this, we know that post-Brexit, some of those skills gaps have then become more obvious than we ever expected.
Very
true. There's a hole in the middle of our labour market, and we need our education system to deal with that.
I agree with that, and thank you for contributing to it. You're always welcome. Tony Breslin, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We have 1 minute left. That's why I butted into him, because I do want to share, finally, some further emails from you. Ernie says, Blair's education promise was just a way of increasing Labour's voter base. Ooh, ouch. Graham says £60,000 of debt's a lot of money for being social. You only grow up when you enter the workplace. I work with many graduates who simply ended up in call centres. They don't require a degree for that. Brett says, I believe education should be free to access, supported by the government, as if you want people to grow up and society to grow. This is what is needed to happen. Sue says, parachuting graduates into top jobs in the police has proved to be a disaster. I have heard that from many people, Sue. To lead a force, you need to have experience and to have walked in the shoes of all levels so that you can get the respect of the officers under you. And finally, as they say in the trade, Arthur. First and foremost, universities should house, expand on and pass to the new generations the accumulated knowledge of mankind for its own sake. I think that is a lovely note to end on, whether you agree with it or not. And Arthur, thank you very much indeed for penning it anyway. It is now 3.5 minutes to 2 o'clock. You've been watching Alistair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. Thank you very much indeed for so doing. I will be back at noon again tomorrow, Sunday. Until then, from me, it's bye-bye. And here is your weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking wet in places as a band of rain moves across the north, with showers in the south. Let's take a look. After a wet morning across Scotland, this afternoon should be brighter, but still with plenty of showers around. It'll also be blustery and cool in the west. Northern Ireland will have a much drier afternoon with some sunny spells developing. Mostly dry, but there's still the chance of a shower. The band of rain will still be across northern England this afternoon, accompanied by some strong winds. It will also be blustery across Wales, especially along the coast, with some showers in the south. Northern parts of the country will be dry, though. The Midlands will see an afternoon of sunshine and showers. Some of the showers could be heavy, but it will still feel warm for this time of the year. Showers may also affect northern parts of East Anglia, but further south it will be mostly dry. There will be cloud around, which is expected to disperse later. Apart from a few showers, much of southern England should have a pleasant afternoon, with a mix of cloud and sunshine and temperatures reaching between 22 and 25 degrees. Heading into this evening, and the band of rain continues to move south with further showers in the northwest, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very